This is Joseph Drust, and welcome back to another episode of Ask ZBrush. So we had a question sent in asking, are there any useful small ZScripts and macros for ZBrush 4R8? So the answer to this question is yes, there is. So I've just opened up a web browser here, and I've just gone to ZBrushCentral.com, which is our ZBrush community forums. And if you just hop over to ZBrush Central, then scroll down here and locate the ZBrush ZScript Utilities forum, and just click that to go there. There is a sticky at the top of this forum, which is called Useful Small ZScripts and Macros for ZBrush 4R8. Now, if you click this link, which will take you to the thread here on our forums, you'll see there is an index at the very top, and it contains various links to different macros and ZScripts that can be used with 4R8 to automate some different processes. So in this list, we have dynamic off and on for all brushes and the ability to save them as well. There's another one called Fit Canvas. There are toggles for toggling the left tray and the right tray by a hotkey. There's a dynamic brush toggle macro. There's also a draw size, store, and restore. And then at the very bottom, there is a curves helper. So this thread is constantly being updated, so it's often wise to just check on it every once in a while and see if there's anything new in here for automating certain processes. So there's one of these that I want to show an example of, which is this curves helper here. So we had an Ask ZBrush question that was based around asking if there was any tips on creating cables and wires to precise location. And the example in which I demonstrated was using Z-spheres and then taking those Z-spheres and generating a curve using the frame mesh functionality. Well, this curves helper plugin here will automate the majority of that process. And then just click this curves helper here. This will take you to the thread here that contains information on this plugin. So there is the installation instructions here and also instructions on how it works. So I just want to demonstrate this really quick because it is a big time saver, especially if you're using Z-spheres to generate curves on your models. So I'm just going to hop over to ZBrush here quick. So now in ZBrush, I just have an example Z-sphere chain here loaded in. If you'd like to see another example of the process I used to create the Z-sphere chain, there's a link below to the AskZBrush video on tips for creating cables and wires. So you can follow along with that one to see how I got to this stage here. And so with the Z-spheres here in a single chain format, I was taking these and just manipulating around a car model here and attaching a tree to the back of it. So using Z-spheres is a really nice way to manipulate or create wires or ropes inside of ZBrush along your models because it gives you a lot of control to where you can place these things. Now, after you have the Curves Helper plugin installed, it'll live in the Z plugin tab at the top here, and there'll just be a Curves Helper. And in here you have two buttons. You have a Copy Z-sphere chain and also a Create Curve. So after you have a single Z-sphere chain created, like the one I have depicted here, you just need to copy that chain. So we're going to go to that Z plugin tab, go to the Curves Helper, going to click Copy Z-sphere chain, and that is just going to store that chain in memory. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to just select a tool that is not our Z-sphere. So I usually have a cube that I usually place on the top of my subtool palette here that just kind of lives off in space. So I'm going to select that subtool. You can also just say append a polymesh 3D star to your scene. So you just want a piece of geometry that you can eventually just delete or get rid of after you've generated this curve. So I just have that selected, and now I'm going to come up to the Z plugin tab again, and this time I'm going to click the Create Curve button. Now, as long as that Z-sphere chain was one single chain and didn't have branches shooting off of it, when you click this button here, it's going to now create a curve based on that Z-sphere chain. So as I click this, you'll see it's telling me the curve has been created, and you can see that I now have a curve falling directly in the middle of that Z-sphere chain. Now this curve is on a separate subtool, so I can come over here and I can toggle my Z-sphere off, and you can see now I just have this curve floating in space. So after you have this curve generated, you can now take any IMM curve brush and click on this curve, and that IMM brush is going to follow that curve. So I'm just going to navigate over the brush palette over here and open this up. And in here, I have a rope IMM curve brush. So I'm just going to select that. And now with this brush selected, I'm just going to come across the curve and click. And this is now going to generate that rope across that curve. So this is really, really nice. So once again, I just started with that Z-sphere and I just positioned it where I want that chain to follow. I then went and downloaded the Curves Helper plugin from ZBrushCentral. And then once you have this installed, you can just copy that Z-sphere chain and then select a new tool that is not the Z-sphere, and then just go to Z plugin and click Create Curve, and it's going to create a curve that follows that Z-sphere chain you had, and then just take an IMM curve brush, click on that chain, and you'll now populate it with your model. Now this curve is still active, so I can move this around if needed, and I can tighten it up, do different things. But this is a really, really nice process to get curves and ropes to follow specific areas on your model. So I hope that helps, and if you have any other questions related to ZBrush pipelines or processes, please use the hashtag AskZBrush on Twitter. Happy ZBrushing!